warmly welcome the Secretary General, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, and give him the floor. You have the floor, please.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I thank Sierra Leone for convening this debate. Since 1945, the United Nations Security Council has been a bedrock of global peace and security. But the cracks in its foundation are becoming too large to ignore. And they are contributing to deadlock, stalemate, and stagnation around today's most pressing crisis. And they are feeding a broader crisis of credibility and legitimacy that is affecting multilateralism itself. The Security Council was designed by the victors of the Second World War and reflects the power structures of that time. And the world has changed since 1945. But the composition of the Council, despite a few changes, has not kept pace. In 1945, most of today's African countries were still under colonial rule and had no voice in international affairs. This created a glaring omission that has remained unresolved until now. There is no permanent member representing Africa in the Security Council, and the number of elected members from the continent is not in proportion to its importance. We cannot accept that the world's preeminent peace and security body lacks a permanent voice for a continent of well over 1 billion people, a young and rapidly growing population, making up 28% of the membership of the United Nations. Nor can we accept that Africa's views are undervalued on questions of peace and security, both on the continent and around the world. Mr. President, Excellencies, Africa is underrepresented in global governance structures, from the Security Council to international financial institutions, but overrepresented in the very challenges these structures are designed to address. Conflicts, emergencies, and geopolitical divisions have an outsized impact on the African continent. And this Council's agenda demonstrates this. Nearly half of all country-specific or regional conflicts on your agenda concern Africa. They are often exacerbated by greed for Africa's resources, which are vital to the global economy, and further spread and aggravated by the interference of external actors. The message is clear: there can be no global security without African security. Africa has proven to be a willing and able partner for peace, particularly with the United Nations, both on the continent and beyond. Through the joint United Nations-African Union framework for enhanced partnership in peace and security, we are addressing complex challenges on the continent, from the Central African Republic to Somalia, the Sahel, and the crisis in Sudan. We are working with the African Union and regional and sub-regional organizations such as ECOWAS to end the scourge of terrorism, which has killed tens of thousands on the African continent, including 11 of our personnel in the Abuja bombing of 2011. Together, we are helping to ensure security, stability, and respect for human rights and the rule of law, while supporting democratic processes and institutions. And this Council's Resolution 2719 has now established a framework for predictable financing of African Union-led peace support operations, authorized by the Security Council through assessed contributions, an important vote of confidence in African capacities and in our partnership. We are now developing a joint roadmap to carry these forward. Meanwhile, African countries host almost half of all UN peacekeeping operations, while contributing troops of their own to global hotspots over the years, including now in Lebanon. Over 40% of UN peacekeepers are African. And let's not forget the meaningful efforts made by African-led forces to restore peace, from Somalia to Lake Chad, from Mozambique to the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In times of crisis and geopolitical division, African countries are often amongst the first to champion peace, multilateral solutions, and adherence to international law and UN Charter. But African efforts and contributions are not being matched by Africa's representation. Ensuring this Council's full credibility and legitimacy means heeding the long-standing call for the UN General Assembly, from the UN General Assembly, various geographic groups, from the Arab group to the Benelux, Nordic and CARICOM countries, and some permanent members of this Council itself to correct this injustice. Mr. President, Excellencies, for different parts of the world to contribute to its proceedings, reform of this Council's membership must be accompanied by a democratization of its working methods. A new agenda for peace puts forward a number of ideas, from more burden sharing among Council members to more systematic consultations with host states and regional organizations, as well as with countries contributing troops and police. And it also calls for improvements and innovation in other parts of the global architecture whose work has a bearing on peace and security. It recommends that member states elevate the work of the Peacebuilding Commission to realize the untapped potential and help mobilize support for national and regional prevention strategies. This includes closer ties with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank and regional development banks to secure sustainable financing for countries as they strengthen peace and security, with important implications for countries on the African continent. The Peacebuilding Fund has been a critical catalyst to mobilize the contribution of international financial institutions. The agenda also calls for a revitalized role of the General Assembly in the area of peace and security. A new agenda for peace has been informing negotiations on the Pact for the Future to be adopted at next month's Summit of the Future. The summit provides a critical opportunity to make progress on these issues and help ensure that all countries can meaningfully participate in global governance structures as equals. I urge all member states to attend and contribute their views and ideas so that African voices are heard, African initiatives are supported, and African needs are met.
Good afternoon, members of the press, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm pleased to deliver these initial remarks on behalf of the members of the African Union Committee of 10 Heads of State and Government on the reform of the United Nations Security Council, namely Algeria, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Kenya, Libya, Namibia, Senegal, Uganda, Zambia, and my country, Sierra Leone. We are joined by A3+ members, Guyana and Mozambique. After nearly 80 years since the establishment of the United Nations and its Security Council, its imbalanced structure of bygone eras persists, undermining the legitimacy and effectiveness. It is therefore fundamentally important to address the issue of non-representation and underrepresentation of Africa in both the permanent and non-permanent categories of the Security Council, respectively. The current lack of representation in the permanent category does not reflect the current global landscape, and it is fundamental to consider the structural changes for its rectification. Additionally, it is significant to evaluate the Security Council's performance and legitimacy to ensure its effectiveness in addressing global challenges. It is deeply saddening to see the continued impact of historical injustice on Africa, and we must acknowledge and address these issues. Africa demands equitable representation in all UN decision-making organs, particularly the Security Council. By ensuring Africa's voice is heard, we can legitimize the UN's work and truly implement decisions that benefit the continent. Continuing this unfairness, we marginalize an entire continent that is highly important on the Security Council's agenda. Africa boasts a population of over 1.3 billion people, and its 54 countries represent about 28% of the total UN membership. Africa plays a significant role in peacekeeping and conflict resolution, yet it is vastly underrepresented. Therefore, our demand for 2 permanent seats with all the rights and prerogatives of current members and 2 additional non-permanent member seats is a matter of common justice that needs to be addressed. I'm therefore pleased that as coordinator of the C10, my country has sparked the first ever debate in the Security Council occurring at a critical time on addressing the historical injustice and enhancing Africa's effective representation in the United Nations Security Council. This debate was essential to spotlight further the urgency of rectifying the historical injustice that has significantly hampered Africa's capability to contribute effectively to the global governance stage, on the global governance stage, and further engage in productive discussions in enhancing the Council's effectiveness and legitimacy. The C10 has demonstrated a strong commitment to addressing the historical injustice and inequality of the Security Council on Africa. The C10 will continue to amplify Africa's voice on this matter in advancing the common African position as outlined in the Ezowini Consensus and SAT Declaration. We are pleased to note that the common African position has received wide support within the reform process. I therefore register our profound thanks and appreciation to the member states, interest groups, and regional groups for their continued and unwavering support for Africa and the common African position in the intergovernmental negotiations at the UN General Assembly. There is general convergence that redressing historical injustice against Africa is viewed as a priority. Several delegations have also mentioned that Africa should be treated as a special case. We are also pleased that the IGN's input to the Pact for the Future to be adopted during the Summit of the Future in September conveys the same imperative message, addressing historical injustice as a priority and treat Africa as a special case. What is now clear to us is the need to take the significant next step. The engagement and discussions have gone on for far too long. We have no doubt that the Council needs reforming, and the common African position has received wide support. It is time to take the next step and put the actual reform of rectifying the historical injustice against Africa. I'm now ready to take a few questions, if there are any.
President Bio. Hello, I'm Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. I just wanted to ask you, where is, in your national capacity, where is former President Nkrumah, and will he be returning to Sierra Leone to face prosecution for his alleged role in the attempted coup?
President Nkrumah is currently in Nigeria, and all necessary steps to make sure that justice is served as far as everybody that was concerned in the alleged coup plot will be enforced.
Yes, Mr. President, Xu Deji with China Central Television. You have a very bold suggestion for the reform of Security Council, including 2 permanent seats and 2 non-permanent seats, and also ask P5 to abandon their veto rights. How much confidence do you have that this proposal will be processed in the UN? Thank you.
Could you please, this is Arun Lewis from Indonesia News Service. Could you please tell us how do you expect to overcome the opposition of groups like the Uniting for Consensus, which have been blocking the reform process?
The African continent has a very compelling case, and that is what we are pushing for. We are not talking about the first question. We are not calling for the total abolition of the veto power. We are saying that if member states want to retain it, it should be extended to all permanent members. And we want to be, Africa deserves a place to be a permanent member of the Security Council. And confidence, we are sure. It's a matter of time. Of course, the gatekeepers will find it difficult to let us in. But as you can see, there is already willingness, and we are gradually inching towards the next steps that we are talking about in order to be able to reach our goal of being a member of the Security Council. So we are very sure that with the support of member states, the C10, and the whole of Africa, we have a genuine and compelling case, and we have a model that we have presented, and we are sure about getting in.
On overcoming the opposition from groups like the Uniting for Consensus?
Well, we don't consider opposition. We have a genuine case, and that is what we are pushing. We know that others, there are quite a lot of, it's a total reform, but we are talking for Africa, and we will welcome what is happening elsewhere, but there should be no opposition, frankly speaking. We have a genuine and compelling case, and that is what we are pushing. Thank you.